This is my review for Yooka-Laylee on Nintendo Switch. Yooka-Laylee is a 64-bit inspired style platformer along the lines of Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie and those kinds of games. Banjo-Kazooie is obviously the main influence here because the developers at Playtonic are actually developers from the original Banjo-Kazooie, owned by Rare. And they developed the first Banjo-Kazooie and probably the second. And then Rare kind of took that franchise and started making more sequels. And I think more and more of the original developers ended up leaving. They ended up regrouping years later to form Playtonic Studios. And they made a game that was almost identical to Banjo-Kazooie called Yooka-Laylee. But instead of a bear and a bird, you are now an iguana and a bat. But the mechanics are similar. And the games are similar, except it's much more modern. There's better graphics, better sound, better controls, tons more moves. Overall, pretty fantastic experience. Graphics-wise, I'm going to say Yooka-Laylee is right up there. It's pretty darn good. It's clean, it's crisp. I think if I had to have a graphics complaint, the only reason I'm going to give it any less than a 9, I'm going to give it an 8.5, and I'm taking a half a point off because it's got bad camera controls. It's a 64-bit inspired game to its core with these awkward camera controls. There are some times where, Yooka-Laylee is running through a valley, and the camera kind of pans down to follow, but you turn, and the camera can't turn because there's like rocks in the way, and it sits there and shakes. And there's just lots of awkward camera movements. You'll get used to it after a while, and you'll start learning the times when you have to manually control the camera and when you can let auto camera take over. But that's really my only complaint. The particle effects were good. It's vibrant. It's colorful. The polygons were good. Everything looks great. Beautifully done. Gameplay-wise, there's a ton to do in this game. Let's talk about the gameplay, because it's a 3D kind of open world-ish platformer. You can kind of choose what you want to do. Your objective of the game is to recover pages of a book, and as you recover these pages, you can either opt to spend them on opening new areas to explore, or you can spend them to expand areas that you've already explored. And some of the areas have areas like sub-areas that you can't get to, or puzzles, or something that you can't get to without a certain move set, and you can purchase the moves from a snake character named Trouser, and you can purchase these moves from him, and you can purchase the moves in any order you want, which unlocks, of course, your ability to access certain puzzles or certain areas of the game, and so you get to kind of choose what you do first, and how you progress through this game. There's a lot to do here. There's a lot of pages to earn. There's a lot of different types of puzzles. There's races. There's overhead style racing. There's combat. There's all sorts of different challenges, and at the beginning of every one, it asks if you want to accept this challenge or not, and you get to say yes or no. So gameplay-wise, I'm going to go ahead and give it a 9.5. This game is right up my alley. I love platformers. I love puzzle games. This is a puzzle platformer with a little bit of combat. It's almost like a Metroidvania in a sense that you have to obtain new abilities to access new areas, and sometimes that means you're going to have to leave this area, unlock another area, go to that, collect some more pages, buy another move, and then come back to the first area. But there's plenty to do. Audio-wise, the music is good, but there is kind of a beep speech to the text. There's no spoken dialogue, but the beep speech is weird because the beeps are made by each character. So each beep has a specific tone for that character that sounds more like and it's these sound effects that each character makes. And some are higher pitch, some are lower pitch, some are deeper, just different tones and cadences and rhythms that tell you who's talking. So you would think that kind of helps. But at times, it's a little verbose, and there's a lot going on. So I think it gets a little annoying after a while. You get used to it, but it's still pretty annoying. I'm going to go ahead and give the audio here a 7. It's a low score, but it's probably the weakest part of the game. Story-wise, it's kind of it's very self-aware. It knows it's a game. There are times when characters would say, "Oh, I'm really not looking forward to these guys showing up in the sequel, in the next game." It knows it's a game. It's very self-aware. There's a lot of puns in the story. The main villain is named Capital B, but he's also a B, but he's also a capitalist, right? He wears a suit, and he's all about profits. There's Dr. Quack, who is a duck, but he's also a quack of a doctor. Ahaha! There's tons of stuff like that. Obviously, I mentioned it before, there's a snake named Trouser, as in a trouser snake. And he's also a snake because he's like this businessman who makes deals. And he wears pants. And he wears a snake that wears pants. That's also trousers. So there's a lot going on there. It works on so many levels. There's a lot of characters that have meta names or descriptions or actions. What is this person's function? So story-wise, I'm going to give it an 8. I feel like that's a pretty generous number for this kind of storyline, because the storyline is pretty basic in itself. The plot of the game, don't expect any twists or turns or anything like that. Overall, that brings this game to an 8.25, and I can round up to an 8.5 on this one. Yooka-Laylee, definitely worth picking up. There is a sequel called Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair that's sometimes available in the eShop, also for $10. Its typical price is around $30 to $40. For both Yooka-Laylee 1 and Yooka-Laylee and Impossible Lair. Impossible Lair is a slightly different game. It's less 3D open world and more like Donkey Kong Country, more like side-scrolling adventures. But there is a 3D open world, and then each level itself has a side-scrolling element to it. A little bit more like a game called New Super Lucky's Tale, if you ever played that one. That one had some side-scrolling elements to it. But anyway, I definitely recommend picking these up. They often go on sale in the eShop for only $10, and when they are at that price point, it's an absolute must pick, because there is so much to do in this game, especially if you love 3D platformers as much as I do.